A couple of videos ago, I talked about the idea of using motifs in our solos, and we worked on just creating them. These are small melodic cells that have a definitive rhythmic or melodic sound that's identifiable and that we can develop over time. We didn't develop them in that video, but let's do that now today as we talk about motivic development in our solos. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rubicki. I'm glad that you're here. And be sure to stick around or check out the end of the video when we're going to listen to a solo performance from Desmond where he demonstrates, I think in an excellent way, all the ideas that we're going to talk about today. When we talk about developing motifs, we can generally break it down into four sort of headings. The first would be variation. The second would be extension. The third is fragmentation. And the fourth is fragmentation and extension. And we'll get into each of these one at a time. We're going to continue to use the song On the Trail that we used in the first video for the reasons that I described there. Simple harmony, a little bit of interest in there, only a 16 measure form. And also I want to note, if I forget to say later, that some of the motifs that I'm using here I used in the first video. And so I am actually trying to continue the ideas that I was doing too. But let's talk now about introducing those various four ways of extending motifs. The first thing is something we'll call variation, and that is to take the motif and more or less repeat it almost exactly rhythmically, but change the melody notes to it. So in order to create continuity, it helps if we repeat something of the motif that we've created. We want to have a connection between the two ideas. So one very quick example in the first example of the motifs with variations that I've got here, the first motif that I came up with is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm going to use that exact rhythm again, but I'm going to change the notes in some way. And the variation would be 1. So one way we can work on this is to, again, focus on just this one idea of variation. And the first exercise you can do with that is to choose a tune that you want to play with, whatever it is, and start some kind of motif, some kind of cell, and then rest, think about what you did, and then repeat that rhythm that you just played, but play different notes. And then rest again, and then do a new motif, and then do a variation on that. You know, new motif, rest, variation on that one, meaning same rhythm, rest, and so on and so forth. Do that as much as you would like to. The next thing you could do is to take the same idea, and so you're picking a tune, you're playing a motif and resting, and then play two developments. Don't just play one, play two things, so you're copying the rhythm twice, but play different notes each time. The third thing you can do is to repeat everything that we're doing in exercise 1, motif, rest, variation, rest, but change the melodic curve of what you're doing. So if it goes up on the variation, have it go down. And then finally, what we can do is repeat that idea, as I say, play and rest, and then do development or do variation, but keep doing variations until you can't do any more. At least a chorus or more. And that may not sound super musical all the time, but it will definitely force you to pay attention to what you're doing, which is something very cool. So what I did was, as I say, take the motifs that I started with from the first video, and I have tried to provide some variations here. I played that first one for you. The third one, for example, now we've gone up a half step, goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm going to repeat that rhythm with different notes. And I play. And there's a slight melodic change there too. The direction of the notes changes. So let's hear them now in context, just one right after the next for one chorus. So again, motif, variation, rest, motif, rest, variation, and so on. 2, 3, hopefully that made sense. And so the next idea that we're talking about is extension. And this is actually connected with the variation that we talked about. And here the general idea is, again, you're playing a motif and then you're going to play a variation on it, playing the same rhythm, but then immediately play more material. It doesn't have to go on for long, but you're just adding to the variation, okay? So you are extending the variation is basically what it is. Again, a way to play this as an exercise is that you play the motif and then rest, play a variation, and then immediately add information to it. Now you can also add information before the variation, before the repetition of the original rhythm. You can add more before it, leading into it. The point is you're just adding to that variation. I've done the same thing here. I've got one chorus and I've done some examples where I kept with the same motifs that I started with and the same variations, but now I've added extensions to them. All of these are at the end, although you can, as I say, can do it before the variation happens. So here, the fourth example on the final line here of the motifs with extension, the motif is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so I'm gonna play that rhythm, change the notes, and then continue the idea with a little more. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that the variation itself does not necessarily have to exactly 100% match the motif itself, but you need to get enough of it. So the motif was, and the variation is, ah. That's the part that I'm grabbing onto, but then I'm continuing it. That's the idea here. So let's hear my examples of extensions. Again, one whole chorus, one right after the next, motif, rest, variation, extension, and a little bit of rest, hopefully. 1, 2, 3. The next sort of big heading is fragmentation, and that means we're basically extracting just a little part of the idea. And to make this effective, you've got to have your original motif be longer than just a couple notes, because you want to get something recognizable from it. But like before, the idea is it's a fragmentation that is connected with variation as well. So we've got the motif, we're going to extract one little part from there and play a variation on that little part, not on the whole motif. That's the essential idea. And to hear it sort of a little bit out of context here, the second motif that I've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm using this as the fragment that I'm going to extract. I'm going to repeat that melody and with variation in, I'm going to repeat that rhythm with variation in the melody. And the repetition and variation goes, so it was, and then, I'm sure you get the idea there. So like before, it's important that you play the idea and rest enough that you can consider what to extract from there, right? So ways to practice this would be, just as I'm going to demonstrate for you here, you're putting on a tune that you want to play, playing a longer motif or a multi-motif phrase. So something that has a couple of elements, something you can grab from, rest and repeat with variation the rhythms from one part of that original idea, and then rest again and do it again. The second way that you can do this is, as I mentioned before, with the with the extension. You can take the fragment from the beginning of the phrase, not the end of the phrase. Right now we've been taking the fragment from the end. You can do another exercise where you do the same thing, but try to take the fragment from the beginning of the motif that you come up with. So let's take a listen to this one chorus of these four examples of motifs with fragmentation. 1, 2, 3. And the final sort of big way that we'll talk about today is a combination of all the things. We'll call it fragmentation and extension. And it sounds complicated, but I'm hoping that it makes a little bit more sense. We're going to do everything we've done before and combine them in a specific way. You play a motif, we're going to extract a fragment from it. We're going to play that fragment again with some melodic variation, and then you're going to extend that. Right? So you're combining the fragmentation and the extension. A example out of time would be like the first example I have here on this page. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first motif I was using before, and I'm extracting the fragment of or like that. So I'm going to repeat that rhythm with a new melody choice, with new melody notes, and then extend it. So I'm not just repeating it, I'm continuing it on. And from there, 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you follow what was happening there? So I'm playing something, taking a little bit out of it, repeating that little bit, and then continuing on from there. And then resting, and then starting a new motif, and so on and so forth. A way that you could practice this is, as I've got it here, you can also, of course, like before, you can take the fragment from the beginning instead of the end. That's one way to do it. And then to go even deeper, right? It's motif inception, minception. Take everything we've done so far. Remember, we ended with a repetition of the fragment and then an extension on that fragment. Within that extension, grab a fragment from there and then repeat that fragment with variation and put an extension on it. And from that extension, grab another fragment, and so on and so on and so on. So you can really start with like ideas really following each other, one right after the next. And let's listen first to my examples of this one chorus of trying to do this idea. And you'll notice the phrases don't start at the beginning of the stave, each staff. In this instance, to make it sound hopefully a little bit more musical and to not have too much rest, I tried to sort of start them in a couple different places, but hopefully it will make sense to you. So let's listen to that now. 2, 3. As I say, hopefully that made sense to you. And I want to remind you and invite you to consider that we are thinking again about continuity, and we're thinking about, in a sense, some kind of sequence, in the sense that when we are playing, we want to choose something that will have an identifiable characteristic to it to start with, something that we can grab onto, be it a certain interval or a particularly strong rhythm, or it could even be a conceptual thing like a very long line, although that can get a little weird to try to hear continuity there. But the idea is you want to have something that you can actually latch onto, and then we must somehow mirror it again for that continuity to be able to be recognized by the listener. So it's not that you are playing a variation that is completely out of nowhere. It's got to sort of be, not sort of, it has to be connected to the first motif in some way to keep that continuity going. That's what the ear is going to latch onto, and that's how we kind of follow a through line of a solo when we are playing with this motivic soloing idea. So to that end, let's take a listen now to a video of Paul Desmond playing a solo that I took some time and wrote some words on there to analyze where I think fragments and extensions are. Of course, it's gray like everything else, like I could be wrong on certain things, but it's what I heard. And what I think is very, very fascinating is really how well it follows the ideas that we've been talking about. In the video itself, I've got the solo at normal speed and then I repeat it slower so it's a little bit maybe easier to process. It's not a super fast solo, but it's repeated again just for our sort of listening sake. So hopefully you'll continue on at the end of this video to check that out as well. But I'll say my goodbye for now. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you were here. Look below for links for PDFs and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.